describing Jade. I it's right in front of me. Thank you. I am going to take a little bit of time today, if it's okay, to share some of my story. Because it's not just my story, it's the story of all the families of the Grief Center and the story of the Grief Center itself. My path to Children's Grief Center happened by accident. An accident on April 4th, 1995. It was a Tuesday. My 15-year-old son Colin was at high school, at track practice. I got the phone call. "Are you Colin's mother?" "Yes," I said. "Your son has been injured, and it's bad." Colin was curious about sports. He wanted to try it all. He played basketball and was on a swim team. When he got to high school the year before, he tried football and wrestling and track. His track event was long jump, but one day he came home saying, "I tried pole vaulting, and I'm good at it." He won the city championship that year in pole vaulting. It was the coach who was on the phone telling me Colin was injured and was in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. All the way to the hospital, I thought, bad? How bad? I didn't like the way the coach had said, "It's bad." He has a concussion, bad. He has a broken leg, bad. Surely it's not that bad. Is this working? Surely it's not that bad. But it was that bad. He had suffered a head injury pole vaulting. He missed the padded mat, hit his head on the asphalt. We'll never know exactly what happened, how it happened. There were different stories. It mattered, but it didn't matter. He was gone. I didn't much care for this new world I lived in, and I certainly didn't trust it. My husband Bob and I didn't know how to show Colin's brother, David, who was only 7, that you could trust again, that nothing this bad would ever happen again. I wasn't sure I believed it myself. I would like to share with you some things I learned along this path. I had already learned a lot from Colin, my firstborn son, in his 15 years. With him, I learned how to make something good out of something bad. When he was sick and had to stay home from school, we would cuddle in his bed and make it story time. We would read all of his favorite books. With Colin, I learned about palindromes, words that spell the same thing, forward or backward, like mom and pop. Colin announced one day that race car was a palindrome. It's the same backwards that it was forward, race car. And it was. And then he said, and star rats is a palindrome. And it was. So then he had his paper and pencil and he was busy for a while, and then he came to me and said, "Mom, rats at a bar grab at a star." That's the palindrome. And it was. Through Colin, I met Krista, Colin's precious girlfriend of 2 months, who had to bear the unspeakable horror of losing her first boyfriend in this way. But I learned about the greatest love a mother can feel, that love that she has for her children. the breadth and the depth of love that is in every fiber of your body, in your bones, in your guts, in the air in your lungs. I learned a lot from Colin's death. I learned that pole vaulting is an incredibly dangerous sport, especially when the safety procedures aren't followed, which apparently they often aren't. I learned that that great love a mother has for her child never dies, even if the child does. It's still there, eternally, longing for that child. I learned that I'm not afraid to die. I think like most mothers, I feel that if my child can do something, I can do it. If Colin could give up life and face the unknown of death, then I can, when the time comes. I couldn't help but consider joining him then. But there was Bob, and there was David. I learned to keep trying to make something good out of something bad. We donated Colin's organs. His heart saved another young man. And his liver was the first liver transplant in New Mexico. And then there was David. I learned a lot from David after Colin died. David saw some things more clearly than I did. He showed me that it made sense to be angry. He wasn't as afraid of anger as I was. All Colin did was go to school and play sports. It did make me mad that he died. If this wasn't worth getting mad about, nothing was. And yet David helped me learn that you can't hang on to the anger. It can make you feel powerful, but it's not really power. It's just anger. It gives you a false sense of purpose and can keep you from engaging in life. But from David, I learned the most important thing of all, that I had reason to go on. I have that greatest love for my child here with me. I could touch him and talk to him and hold him. I had to find a way to live in this new world I didn't like. I had to see other mothers to see if they could survive the death of their child. I went to a meeting of the Compassionate Friends, a group of parents who had had a child die. It helped save my life. I saw those other mothers who were standing up, walking, talking, making sense, going to work. It was the only place I felt normal. Bob and I had this group of parents to be with. I wanted David to have something too, but there was no Children's Grief Center. But one day I got another phone call. A few people were talking about starting grief support groups for children. I said, where do I go and when? I poured myself into it. I wanted this grief center to be the best. And there were many of us who had the same goal, for the same reason, because of our own personal losses. We all left our meetings with the same feeling, enlivened and inspired. We all said, this is the best thing we do all week. We had our first group in 2000, where we started meeting our children. Like Jacob. Jacob came to our very first support group. He walked into our group with a combination of nervousness and anger on his face. He looked right at me and he said, I'm not going to talk. And I said, that's okay. You don't have to talk. He sat down next to me and as if to assure himself that he wasn't going to speak, he took his sticky name tag off of his shirt and he pasted it across his mouth. In solidarity, I took my sticky name tag off and put it across my mouth. I had said, I'm not going to talk either. We sat in the group with our name tags over our mouths while the other children talked about who in their family had died. Then he looked up at me and started walking to the wall. He looked back at me to see if I was coming. I went with him. He went to the wall, he faced it, he took off his sticky name tag and he said, "My mother killed herself." And I took off my name tag and said, "And that's why you didn't want to talk. I understand." And I put my hand on his shoulder. I thought, if Jacob could face that great fear and overcome it, so can I. I also met Lily, who said, "My family was in a terrible car accident. My mother died, my father died, and my sister died." She said, "But I survived. I am so lucky." And I thought, if Lily can feel lucky, so can I. And I met Jack, who explained the Grief Center to another little boy who was new. He said, "We come here to help each other cry." One of my favorite mottos of the Grief Center is, "We get it." We don't run away from death. The world is full of people who say, "That's too sad," or "I can't hear that," or "I have to go now," either with their words or with their feet. We don't turn away from the story about the loss. We embrace it. We're all the same. I'm the same as every family member that comes to the Grief Center. The people they loved who died did ordinary things that people do every day, like drive a car, ride a bike, fly in a plane. Things happen to their loved ones that can happen to anyone. They got cancer, maybe they got depressed and couldn't get over it. This organization was born out of death. It grew, nurtured by grief and love. The grief and love of all the people that helped start it, and all the people that made it work now. We have all shared our pain with each other, and that has made a difference. Oh, and I mentioned Krista, Colin's precious girlfriend of 2 months. She grew up and got married. And guess what? Her husband volunteers for Children's Grief Center. I didn't want to grieve alone, and I didn't want David to grieve alone. At Children's Grief Center, we don't want any child to grieve alone. We all make something good out of something bad. Having other people in my life who have lost loved ones has helped me heal. And I am just grateful if I've been able to help someone else. Thank you.